Welcome back to the Case Files. We're your hosts, Georgia Scherrer
and Jacob Dougherty.
Today is a special edition of our show as we will be discussing the effects and implications of a widely debated topic regarding true crime, the death penalty. Join us as we dive deeper into the controversy behind this topic. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is highly controversial and deeply polarizing, the death penalty. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, the punishment of execution administered to someone who has been convicted of capital crimes such as murder or treason is known as the death penalty. Many countries have abolished the death penalty, but it's still legal in some parts of the world, including the United States. Our goal today is to understand the different arguments for and against the death penalty and to examine its impact on society.
Let's start with the arguments in favor of the death penalty. Supporters of the death penalty argue that it is a necessary deterrent to prevent people from committing crimes. They also argue that it serves as a form of justice for the families and victims. Another argument is that it saves money. According to the OHCHR, opponents of the death penalty often point out that it costs more to execute someone than to imprison them for life. However, proponents argue that the cost of executing a criminal is lower than keeping them in prison for decades.
Now let's examine the arguments against the death penalty. Opponents of the death penalty argue that it is an inhumane form of punishment which violates the right of life. They also point out that the death penalty is often applied in a discriminatory manner, with people of color and low-income individuals being disproportionately sentenced to death. Another argument against the death penalty is that it's irreversible. According to the CDCR, there have been instances where people have been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death, only to be exonerated later. In such cases, the death penalty is irreversible and cannot be undone.
Let's take a look at some real cases that highlight the complexities and controversies surrounding the death penalty. In 1992, Cameron Todd Willingham was convicted of murdering his 3 young daughters in a house fire. He was sentenced to death and executed in 2004. However, the subsequent investigations revealed that the forensic evidence used in the trial was faulty, and experts argued that the fire was not arson at all. This case raises the question of whether an innocent person was executed and the irreversible nature of the death penalty.
Another case that drew significant attention was that of Troy Davis, who was convicted of killing a police officer in Georgia in 1989. Despite significant doubts that he was guilty and a lack of physical evidence, Davis was executed in 2011. His case sparked international protests and highlighted the issue of racial bias in the criminal justice system. There are also cases where people have been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death only to be exonerated later. One such case is that of Anthony Ray Hinton, who spent 30 years of his life on death row for a crime that he did not commit. DNA evidence eventually proved his innocence, and he was released in 2015. Hinton's case highlights the risk of wrongful convictions and the irreversible nature of the death penalty.
These cases illustrate the complex and controversial nature of the death penalty. While supporters argue that it is a necessary form of punishment and justice for victims, opponents point out the risks of wrongful convictions, the discriminatory application of the death penalty, and the psychological toll on families. Now, let's dive into a discussion.
Diving right into this, do you have any previous convictions or just ways that you felt about this in the past?
So my opinion on this is it's based on a case-to-case situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say in the majority of cases, I don't think the death penalty should be used. It's just very, very extreme. And especially if you don't know for sure that this person committed the crime, you don't have overwhelming evidence against them. You don't want to wrongfully put someone to death.
Sure.
But on the other hand of it, if someone is a serial killer like Ted Bundy, who killed over 30 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
killing
he
him,
admitted to that.
And he admitted to it several times. I mean, I think it's just a way of closure for the families.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion?
I kind of agree with you. It's irreversible in all cases. But if someone they've admitted to being guilty of this crime, they're not persistently saying they're not guilty. They didn't go to I almost said church, going to the court saying I'm not guilty for this. Because Ted Bundy admitted to around 30 of his crimes, even though there's speculation there have been many more. I think that it's not necessarily wrongful in all cases. I think that I don't agree with it because in the viewpoint that someone does this heinous crime, they commit this terrible, terrible thing to be able to go on with their lives. Because for some people, it's a lot of mental disorders that go through this. They have this just incessant need to be able to cause harm, um, I think that they should have to live out their crimes in jail and live out their life knowing that what they've done is not something that can be taken away with the death penalty. Um,
Because could the death penalty be like a form of mercy, do you think?
that's what
like,
I'm
yeah,
essentially saying.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that it's a kind of way to say we're freeing you from this prison of your brain almost. And so by giving someone the death penalty, you're taking away their ability to actually pay, because that's why we have
yeah.
jail, for you to sit there and think about your actions, for you to pay service to your community for your actions. And so when you give someone the death penalty, you take away their sentencing essentially, you
Yeah,
know?
they're just gone. I mean, if
So yeah.
they don't really have to like think about what they did and think about what they've caused.
Sure, yeah.
Hmm.
So that would be the reason I would be against the death penalties,
Hmm.
because they don't live out their crime essentially. And then a reason that I guess I would be for the death penalty would be um, because I think in some odd sense it gives survivors and gives the family of survivors closure. You know, it gives them the ability to say, this person has no chance of getting out of jail. Ted Bundy escaped jail twice. And so it gives them no ability to escape. It gives them no ability to harm anyone in the future. It gives the family closure to say, like, I don't have to wonder if he's going to get out eventually. Not even if it's legal that he gets out, like he's not going to be released in the end.
Yeah, I think that also though varies on like a case by case basis
Mm-hmm.
because some families that might not bring closure to know that someone died. And I mean, I don't know if I would feel great if someone they killed someone because of a crime that I was related to. I don't know. It would just want to make me feel good on the inside. I don't think it would give me closure. I
Yeah.
think it would just make me
But there
more
have been
upset.
cases where it does bring people
Yeah,
closure, you
yeah,
know? So I guess that would be, because
mhm,
also I'm speculating, you know, I
yeah.
guess that would be the only reason I can think of that being justified. But what do you think about, going on to one of our first topics, what do you think about the audience, the fact that when someone gets like lethal injection, or you know, you're able to watch them in the, I mean, there have been also
Yeah,
press in that room before, we're watching
yeah.
them. So what do
With the
you think
glass window.
about
It
that?
reminds me of the Hunger Games. Not gonna lie, it's like you're watching someone die. Like
It's an odd concept,
yeah, it's
right?
very very odd to
Yeah.
me. It's I mean I guess I understand it. There has to be witnesses to the death to make sure that it actually
And the
happened.
closure,
Yeah, and
yeah.
closure. But it feels very wrong to me.
If a
Yeah,
serial killer were to look me in the eye
yeah,
and like, because most often they say things when they're not like right in mind,
yeah,
and they're saying things that are really mean and odd, I don't think I would find so much closure in that, being
yeah.
able to watch that. But
Have you seen the rooms? It's scary. It's like a glass
it
window,
is.
and
It's like this full window. It's all white, and
yeah,
there's like a little
it's dystopian to me. Yeah.
audience. Yeah, it's an odd concept, but again, that's just the idea of closure, being
Yeah.
able to say like, I'm safe from this now. Because if someone were to tell me like this person got the death penalty, there have been cases where people are just convinced that someone's not dead. You know, like there are so many cases saying people are just convinced that Ted Bundy's still out there, which, you know,
Yeah.
okay. But they're convinced by that. And so I guess for a lot of people, being able to say, I went into that room, I watched it happen, like I can finally be free from this, I would be thankful, I guess, to have freedom from that.
I'm gonna stick with my
Still,
Katniss Everdeen Hunger
it's a
Games.
weird concept. I'm
I
not
know,
arguing with you. I think it's
yeah,
a weird concept, but I think that there may be benefits to it for the
yeah.
survivors or for the family.
I feel like if I watched that, I'd be scarred for life. Honestly, I don't want to watch someone die. I feel like it would bring back.
I don't think
painful-
anyone like
Yeah.
wants to watch it. I think if it's offered though, and someone needs that, closure is so important to us as
Yeah.
human beings. It's so important for us to be able to say, I can move on from this, because usually it's not that easy to just say, this thing happened to me, keep walking forward. Usually you need something to bring it all together. When someone dies, you go to a funeral or a celebration of life,
Mhm.
you know, because you need that closure for them. That when you get into an argument with your best friend or something, you find out she's moving away or they're moving away, right? You talk to them,
Mhm.
and because you want that closure before they leave.
I feel like it would be, I feel like it would be painful to watch that or bring back really bad memories of seeing that serial killer who might have killed a family member or a close friend. It just, I don't know. I don't think it would make me feel good. Who knows? I guess it works for some
I
people.
guess we'll never know, you know? But
Hopefully
I mean, we can
never
definitely
know.
speculate. So, how can we balance the need for justice and punishment with the recognition of human life and the value of human life? Is the death penalty? Do you think it's a balance of punishment and justice?
I feel like it's just so varied by state to state, especially in the United States. It's just kind of all over the place.
In California, we still apparently we've overturned the. It says right here, according to the capital punishment in California by Wikipedia, 13 people have been executed in California since the death penalty was reinstated in 1977. 162 other people have died on death row from causes, 30 of them from suicide, though. So, and a lot of people end up sitting on death row for a long time before they're actually like executed. So even in California, we have that.
It's just so all over the place. Yeah. Especially, the last meals and stuff like that, where they can eat whatever you want. It's just, I don't know, dystopian to me. It freaks me out.
The internet has been romanticizing that. Have you seen all of those, like, my last meal would be Popeyes or whatever? Like, have you seen that? Yeah. I thought that was so weird. Like, why are we romanticizing or, like, fantasizing in our free time about what our last meal would be about? Like,
I also feel like it's weird that they're even giving them the last meal. It's like kind of
like a reward.
Yeah, it's like a reward. Like they can get whatever they want. They can make any request.
Or like last words. Yeah. Someone goes out there and records what someone's last words may be. So
I mean, if it's just a horrible person and the goal of the death penalty is if you don't want them on this earth anymore, you're like kind of bringing them back into the attention, all their memories back. They're probably going to cycle in the media, and it's just going to be bringing the case back.
Especially allowing press into that room.
It's weird. I don't know.
It's an odd thing to like broadcast.
Hunger Games. Sorry.
Oh my god. It's an odd thing to broadcast. Yeah, and I guess it would be more Hunger Games when you bring the press into it, because that was the whole ideal of the Hunger Games was that you were broadcasting everything for anyone to watch any time of day. And even if you were absolutely in the poorest part of the world, there was still an ability to get that broadcast out. And so this is I don't know, it's weird thinking about justice, and I think it really determines your belief. Like when you say you're pro or against the death penalty, you're basically saying that you think that the scale is tipped as far as justice and punishment goes. And I think it really it depends on someone's beliefs. Like if I were to be, I don't know, pro death penalty and I'd say it's justice for the family, then someone who says I'm against it, they might say I don't think that it's more of a punishable offense. I think it's too punishable.
I feel like it's honestly more of a punishment. Like just sticking someone in solitary confinement for 50 years of their life. That seems like worse to me than the death penalty. Like in that way, you're really making them reflect.
Sure.
And you have to on their crimes.
Pay for the crime.
Not just die.
Do the crime, pay for the time. Something like that. So I agree with you that it's. I think that there are a lot of different ways that you can take it, and that's what makes this a really interesting topic. What role do wrongful convictions play in executing an innocent person?
A huge role, like a very big role, because that's.
I know you have
so
little thoughts about it. Yeah,
that's very scary. Imagine being a juror on the case. There's 12 people, and you have to decide whether someone dies. Like that's crazy. And that's a lot of responsibility and examining all the evidence, and people make the decision, like this person has to die. And I feel like for that to happen, there just has to be so much evidence against the person, like where it's really undisputable. This person probably has to be admitting to committing these crimes, and just like fully 100%, he had to have done it or she had to have done it. I mean. Otherwise, there's a really big risk, which is why I was talking about like solitary confinement or some other imprisonment. Because if you eventually find out, like, oh shoot, we made the wrong conviction, like we need this guy is innocent, you have the ability to let him out.
Yeah,
he's not stuck. or he's not dead.
Yeah, there's someone who was just released after 13 years, 15 years in jail for something he didn't do. And I just looked it up. According to justice.gov, the federal death penalty system, it is to recommend a sentence of death, the jury must determine the defendant had the requisite culpability with respect to the victim's death, must unanimously agree that the aggravating factor or factors is found sufficiently outweighing any mitigating factors to justify a capital sentence. It must be unanimous.
It's 12
Everybody
people.
on that jury must say, I think that this is...
You must die.
I think this is deserving, which
Yeah.
is... That's kind of crazy to think about. Like,
I don't see... I'm kind
that
of
many
shocked,
people
honestly,
coming
that 12
to-
people made
with
that
all
decision.
different views, came to that same opinion.
Maybe it just shows that a jury can determine a lot, because if it's picked incorrectly, maybe some people, maybe it's biased towards or against the death penalty. I mean, that could have a huge impact on someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and a lot of people, when they do advocate for getting rid of the death penalty, it's about innocent people having to deal with that. And that's why I started this off and I said, like, unless someone pleads guilty, unless they say, like, my bad, guys, that was me, I don't think that this should be something... You can keep them on death row, you can keep them in solitary, but until someone admits to what they've done, I don't think that this should be something we necessarily lean towards. And then there was also something that we mentioned earlier about the expenses and whether or not it would be more expensive to keep someone in jail or to give them the death penalty.
That's crazy, because that's basically putting money over someone's life.
Yeah.
It
saves money. According to OHCHR, often point out that it costs more to execute someone than to imprison them for life.
Well, the prisons in the United States actually work for profit. They get paid by the government.
That's an interesting thing, isn't it? No one talks about it.
They get paid by the government to run the prison, and they get money from like inmates who want to buy like certain goods and stuff. It's really weird.
It's a weird system, right? It's so odd. People are letting other people go free, like 7 years maybe into their sentence for life, because it's easier than keeping them in jail. That's so...
Yeah.
That feels Hunger Game to me.
Yeah.
Like, very taboo. Why is that allowed? How do you think that the death penalty affects the criminal justice system and society as a whole?
I feel like it's a taboo subject. I don't think a lot of people like to
talk about it because it's so controversial.
No one wants to think about it. The fact that they execute people still in modern times, where you always hear about it in history books with the guillotine. They still do it to this day.
That's true. Yeah. Or the hanging.
Yeah.
Sure. And you watch movies and you're like, that is so violent. That's so awful. Did you watch Jojo Rabbit?
No, I didn't. But...
Oh, God, now you have to watch it. I'm not going to spoil anything, don't worry. But it's just, there's a fair amount of like violence through a child's perspective in that movie. And so we look at things like that and we get so upset and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible and violent. And we watch the Hunger Games and we're like, what is happening? Like, why are people... I still get so anxious when I watch the Hunger Games. I'm like, start freaking out.
Sorry we were talking so much about the Hunger Games, but it just released on Netflix.
It's so dystopian.
Yeah.
It's so... But even Divergent, like any kind of dystopian... The Giver, I'm sorry. It's weird because we look at something and we're like, that's so violent, that's so awful. And then we turn around and we're like, oh, but he deserved it. She deserved it. So... Oh,
The Giver. The Giver is like very... I feel like it relates to this.
Seen The Giver.
The Giver with the lethal injections.
Never seen The Giver.
You've never seen it?
Only heard about it. I remember we did that whole dystopian project on it, like last year or something. A lot of people did The Giver. I did Coraline. Besides the point. So, affecting the criminal justice system versus society. Is there any difference between those two as far as their effects go?
I don't know. I feel like society is very integrated into the criminal justice system. through the jury because people just get picked to be on the jury like that. And I don't know, is more education needed for these people so they know the implications of what they're doing? They're not just put on the case and they have to decide this.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
I've known people in the past that say, like, I'll do whatever I get. I'll do whatever I have to get out of jury duty.
Yeah.
And I think that's taking away from the main point of being on jury duty. But also, the lawyers and the attorneys are the ones who pick the juries in most cases. So if I were against someone and I would have to get paid in order for them to be found guilty, which would, depending on the state I'm in, most likely turn out in the death penalty, I think that there would be bias in choosing the jury. And I think that's where a lot of issues stem from without really realizing that they're stemming from that.
I mean, it's just, especially on big cases, most of the jury probably already knows about this case from the media or some other news source.
And they already have their
biased.
opinions.
They already have their opinion. They're just sitting there and they're like, okay. And then they don't really listen to the trial.
Like the Idaho student murders. That was a huge...
I don't know how they're gonna pick a jury on that one because it was all over the news.
Huge press kind of deal.
Aren't juries supposed to not know about the case before stepping in?
They're not supposed to know anyone like closely or personally, and they're not supposed to have any opinions that they can use against them necessarily.
That's gonna be it's just
intense.
Almost impossible.
Yeah,
I think it's impossible to do that
because it's so hard for us not to form our own opinions all the time. As human beings. So without,
it's like a utopian belief, but it can never happen.
Like we all think that I can, even when I write articles, it's hard to stay unbiased sometimes. It's hard when you learn about something. Coming into this podcast, even I had an opinion. I'm sure you had an opinion, and yet it's necessary that you expound on both beliefs because then that's where you end up learning the most.
Yeah, that's exactly because I actually wrote an article earlier this year on the school board candidates. And I had to go interview. I had to go interview all 6 candidates with all very different beliefs, and you just learn a lot about things that maybe you didn't think about before.
Sure.
And
and you ask the questions, and if you're biased, you won't get the interview you want. If you're biased, you won't get and this applies to anyone. If you're biased, you will not end up getting the respect or necessarily the quote-unquote ending you want. But if you just take it with a grain of salt, you look at both sides, you're like, this is what it is, you move forward from that. And I guess our last topic for discussion would be, does the death penalty serve as an efficient deterrent to crime, or are there alternative forms of punishment?
So I feel like if you're sane, maybe. Tying this back into our last episode. If you're insane, maybe not. I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
So you're saying that if someone is sane and they think of someone and they're like, man, the death penalty.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't commit this crime anymore.
I don't want to die.
I think it's also like this idea, like right now in my state of mind, just thinking right now, I'm like, I think I can comfortably say by the end of my life, I will not have gotten the death penalty,
You sure about that? No.
But the thing is, that's what I'm saying. The thing is, you'll never know.
Yeah.
Like, I think people think this is something, like, even if I go to jail, this is something that's not going to happen to me, Even Ted Bundy, one of the reasons for his escape was because he found out that there was a possibility of him getting the death penalty, and he made a run for it. And so, it's just something that you don't think it's going to happen. And so although I think it may be a great deterrent, like, hey, if you kill someone, there's a large possibility that you're really going to pay for it, But then there's also like this is never going to happen to me,
It's just, especially because people are very, I would say, rarely executed at this point.
You don't hear a lot about it in the news or anything. Even the Alex Murdaugh case, he got away from the death penalty.
Yeah, one of the reasons why he did that is because he pled not guilty. So they couldn't...
Like what I was saying earlier,
There's just not enough evidence or like concrete that he did it.
So I it's very controversial, I think that you should form your own opinions. Trust good sources that will tell you what you need to know, that are unbiased.
Yep. And with that, Great advice from Georgia. We're gonna move over to our outro. It remains clear that the death penalty is a very controversial topic and will likely be debated for years to come. Thank you for joining us on this special edition of the Case Files. Be sure to check out our other episodes and topics such as the Idaho student murders, Jody and Saren, and Billy Milligan. That's all for now, and we will catch you next time on the Case Files.